Hey everybody, it is Professor Parish, and we are at week 6. Crazy! We only have a few weeks left of this class, which is insane to think about that it has flown by this fast. So this week I have 2 videos for you all to watch. This first one that I'm going to post on here is basically going to summarize the rest of our drama unit, go over assignments, things like that. So it's going to be a pretty brief video, just kind of summarizing the rest of our drama unit and what we have to come for this week in terms of assignments. The second video I'm going to post is going to be specifically talking about the guidelines for our final paper. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this over to student view. I'm recording this on Sunday, so if you've not turned in the assignments for this week, for week 5, please make sure you've done so. But we're going to go ahead, you've got these assignments due this weekend by tonight, but we're going to go ahead and go into week 6. So there are 4 assignments here due. The first one is our week 6 drama discussion forum, or just concluding drama, as I talked about last week. So the discussion forum's pretty straightforward. I'll go ahead and pull that up and show you all. Alright, so it's just pretty basic. We're just reviewing the genres of drama, discussing which genre you liked best, etc. So it's a pretty easy discussion forum this week. That's going to be due on Friday with your responses due Sunday. So the second thing is the drama exam. As our other 2 exams have been in the past, it is not timed. You can save this exam. You are free to work on it throughout the week. Just make sure that you submit it by 11:55 on Sunday night. Just for future reference and to note, because I've had a few people ask me about it, if you are working on your drama exam really close to the deadline, you started at 11:50 for some crazy reason, once 11:55 hits, the exam will actually shut down and it will just save what you've got, and the rest of it you'll get a 0 on. So I've actually had students do that in other classes, and they're like, is this a universal thing? Yeah, it kind of is. So just be aware of that. Make sure you start the exam early, give yourself plenty of time, and that way you can get it turned in. There's not going to be a whole lot of questions asked. It's pretty straightforward. If you've done the fiction and poetry exams, this is pretty much on the same basis. So open book, no time limits. Just make sure you get submitted by Sunday night. And then our drama paper is due this Sunday as well. So far, I've seen several outlines and theses for our drama paper, and they all look great. So, as I said last week, this paper is probably the easiest one of the semester, which I know a lot of you are probably glad, because after the poetry paper, you're like, I need to decompress and have a simple paper. That's what this is. Speaking of poetry papers, I have actually got your poetry papers all graded, so you should get feedback on those. If you choose to revise, and if I've encouraged you to revise in my feedback, then you have a couple weeks to do that. Just make sure to get started on that. I think, let me scroll down here. Paper revisions are actually due finals week, so you've got a few weeks to actually revise if you choose to do so. But yeah. And then finally we have our paper 4 thesis and outline. I'm actually going to talk about the paper 4 thesis and outline in the second video. So this video is going to be pretty short because I want you to also watch this video for paper 4. Please watch it, I beg you, because it's going to answer all of your questions and it's going to give you a lot of information about what I'm expecting. I will be able to tell if you've not watched the video, because you will likely ask me a question about paper 4 and be like, I don't know what to do, and I'll be like, you should watch the video. So just make sure that you do that, alright? But we're going to finish up this video. These are the assignments due this week. Pretty straightforward, and I'm going to finish talking about drama, and then I'll let you guys go to the other video to see about paper 4. But let me go to our resources and pull our PowerPoint back up. Okay, get back on here. There we go. Alright, so drama presentation, we're going to pick back up where we left off. We talked about Greek tragedy and Shakespeare last week. We are going to finish up talking about American drama and comedy. Okay. Alright, so American drama, go back here. Alright, American drama has not been around for very long. It basically became in development around the early 1900s. And up until the 1900s in America, plays had been relatively just rehashes of Shakespeare. They'd been Victorian era plays, lots of plays about kings and queens and upper class, rich Victorian era families. Very Pride and Prejudice-y. And up until the 1900s, they'd been very popular. The issue going into the 20th century in America was that there was a lot of crises going on. You were leading into World War I, then the Great Depression hit, World War II. There was a lot of devastation and confusion and anxiety on Americans' minds at the time, especially during the Great Depression. The Great Depression brought about in the 1920s into the 1930s this sense that people didn't want to hear about rich people's lives because they couldn't relate to them. The mass audiences that had once purchased into these plays to escape into these fantastical worlds of these rich families, they were done. They were over it. They're like, we're poor, we're struggling. I really don't care about these families and their first world problems. is pretty much the mindset behind it. So a lot of playwrights at that time began thinking, okay, well, nobody wants to watch our plays about rich people, so what do we need to do? And so there became this need for realism in drama. People wanted to see protagonists that they could relate to, that they could connect with, and a king and queen just wasn't it. So American drama became developed as a subgenre of dramatic plays and theater, kind of as a way to show the ordinariness and connect to the quote-unquote everyman or every person, layperson, that was coming to see the plays. And so it's a very realistic take on theater. There's not really any fantastical elements. It's all dealing with real issues, real people, and a lot of audiences connected very, very well with that, especially during the 1920s into the 1930s, and even going back into the Civil Rights era when you had plays like Raisin in the Sun come out, which was dealing with issues of race and the American dream and many other factors. If you're planning on doing Raisin in the Sun for your paper number 3, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'll let you reveal that to me in your paper. But basically, American drama, it follows a very chronological pattern. It's very set up in a linear style from start to finish. It deals with realistic ideas, realistic themes. Some examples would be Raisin in the Sun and then obviously Death of a Salesman are probably the two most iconic examples of American drama. And both plays deal with the idea of the American dream and whether or not it's attainable, whether or not it's what everyone thinks that it is, and then kind of also family dynamics within the context of these themes. So those two are probably the most famous out of the American drama plays, but there's a lot others that you can go off of, and our book lists some examples of that as well. I would say History at the Mystery at the Middle of Ordinary Life by Don DeLillo, which we looked at last week, that would be an example of an American drama. And then around this time, we also began seeing changes in comedy. Now, comedy has been around since the beginning of theater. Comedy has been around since Greek times. It was heavily around during Shakespeare's times. But it's changed. I think a lot of times we think that comedy... It's funny because I think a lot of people think comedy has become more crude as time has gone on. We think, oh, comedy, it's just so vulgar now, and it wasn't like that. I want to take those people back to Shakespeare's times because he makes some pretty lewd comments in his plays, especially his comedies. Greek plays that were comedies were very sexually charged, graphic, crude humor with lots of like phallic imagery and all of this like vulgar stuff going on. And that was the only place that you could get away with it was because it was a theater. That was what people came to see. It was a spectacle. And then Shakespeare just took that to another level. His comedy was also very visceral and crude and tongue-in-cheek. It was a little more restrained than the Greek times because he kind of was on a paycheck and had certain standards he had to uphold. But he found ways to kind of slip in these very clever, subtle jabs of sarcastic humor. And then now I would argue that most plays that do comedy kind of you pick your own flavor. You can do the more vulgar, dark humor like Sweeney Todd, or you can do the more like lighthearted, family-friendly comedy like you see in Wicked. You kind of get to pick and choose which types of comedy you want to use, but it's gone through various stages. So our book defines 3 basic types of comedy, and I've kind of broke them down in this slide here. So satire is what we would argue as the highbrow humor. Satire battles against hypocrisy, callousness, stinginess. It's all very dry humor, very high profile, very serious. It requires a bit of reading to get that humor. And so my example would be Coen Brothers. They're infamous for their very highbrow satire like we see in Fargo or the movie Burn After Reading. It's just very upper crust humor that sometimes people don't get because you have to kind of know all the ins and outs or the inside jokes and the things that the context that it's about. So we have parody to kind of supplement that. Parody is a little more kind of mainstream. It's very distinctive and eccentric. It's very visceral and image-related comedy, but it's also a little bit more digestible for modern audiences. You don't have to get all of the historical context to get satire like you do with parody. So my examples would be obviously Monty Python. Monty Python does a fun job of balancing between parody and farce, because there's some parts of Monty Python that are really farcical and dumb, and we're going to talk about farce in a minute. But at the base level, Monty Python, the Holy Grail, that movie is a parody. It's parodying medieval films. It's parodying a lot of tropes that we saw in medieval films or medieval literature. It was just making fun of it, and in a funny, quirky way. Twin Peaks, I would argue, does the opposite. Twin Peaks toes the lines between satire and parody. It's a little bit more highbrow, a little bit more surreal and artistic, but Twin Peaks is essentially a parody and a satire of the soap opera franchise. And a lot of people, when it came out, thought that it was a soap opera, and then the more it developed, people are like, well, this isn't really like a soap opera. It's almost making fun of it in this really kind of artistic, surrealist way. I really love Twin Peaks, but yeah, it's a good example of that. And then if you've ever seen the Adult Swim series Between Two Ferns, if you've not seen it, you definitely should. They're very short, 2 to 5 minute clips. Zach Galifianakis, who plays the guy in The Hangover with the fanny pack and the baby, he is the host of this fake talk show, and he brings real celebrities on there, and he just asks them the worst questions. And it's all a parody. It's just making fun of the talk show genre. So if you've not seen it, I recommend at least watching one episode. It's pretty funny. And then farce is the kind of lowbrow humor. It's very surface level. Pretty much anybody can get what the joke is in a farce. And the examples I would use are Family Guy, Robot Chicken. South Park, oddly enough, kind of toes the line between farce and parody. And Monty Python does as well. But it's just basically, critics usually frown upon it because it doesn't require a lot of critical thinking to get a farcical comedy, but at the same time, it can be very effective. So all 3 of these types of comedies have pros and cons, you could say, that they deal with. Other types of comedic terms that Chapter 30 talks about, chase of wit is where characters trade quick remarks back and forth. And we see this in a variety of plays. A modern example of this would be in the Avengers movie, where Loki and Tony Stark are having a conversation, and Loki's like, we have an army, and Tony Stark's like, we have a Hulk. Like, that's a kind of chase of wit. And then if you read Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock and other characters have like a chase of wit. Like him and Moriarty have very much banter back and forth. And you can find usually characters that are foils, and we talked about foils last week. Usually if they're a foil, then they're going to have that chase of wit moment where they go this back and forth dialogue. Wordplay is just verbal humor. Like we use things like puns, which are various iterations for humorous effects of words. The one that stands out to me is if you go watch Batman and Robin, where it's got Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, came out in the late 90s. There is a meme where someone said, try to spot how many puns are in the first 10 minutes of this movie. Because it's just Arnold Schwarzenegger making ice puns, where he's like cool dude, cool time dude, cool off. Like it's really lame, but it's also kind of funny because I'm a sucker for puns. And then we have stock characters, which sometimes can be set up to be laughed at. So, for example, in literature and in plays to film, like in Beauty and the Beast, Le Fou, which is French for the fool, or we have the gargoyles and Hunchback of Notre Dame. Different scenarios. These stock characters are just meant for people to laugh at. You have kind of that foolish, bumbling sidekick character like Le Fou is in Beauty and the Beast that is supposed to be laughed at. The live action version kind of tweaks that character a little bit, but usually in a play you're going to have a stock character that's meant to be the funny character. And then finally we have tragicomedy, which is a type of comedy that's sort of a mixed bag. It's often called black humor or dark humor because it's funny, but it kind of plays tragic or sad events as being funny. So it's definitely not everybody's cup of tea humor-wise. I honestly find dark humor really funny, but I know a lot of people that do not, and that's okay. That is totally fine. It's comedy, and I don't know if you all talked about this in English 121. Comedy is the hardest thing, I believe, when we talk about pathos. We talk about emotional persuasion, emotional reactions. Comedy is the hardest because everybody's senses of humor are so unique and so different. It can be hard to land those jokes and make them effective. All right. But yeah, that's pretty much our last 2 chapters in drama. So make sure that you've taken notes there for our final exam and for our drama exam there. And then also make sure, I'm going to be posting in our syllabus handouts and videos, and also in our announcements here, I'm going to post both videos, both this video and the video talking about our thesis for paper 4, because I want to kind of make it its own thing that you can look back on, so you don't have to weed through this whole video to get to it. All right. So make sure you watch both those videos for this week. Make sure that tonight you get all your assignments from week 5 submitted, and feel free to go ahead and work on week 6. You will note, as I look through our weekly assignments, week 6 is posted, and week 7 is as well. We'll talk about week 7 next week. There's a lot to talk about, but if, for example, you want to go ahead and do the MLA exam and the reading response, you can go ahead and do those. Don't do the annotated bibliography ahead of time. Wait on that assignment because I do want to talk about it. But definitely feel free to go ahead and do these. Go ahead and do the discussion forum if you want. And then finals week, as you'll notice, we'll talk about it next week, but your final exam in paper 4 Dropbox will be due. But I want to go ahead and talk about the peer review and annotated bibliography assignments in next week's video, so just hold off on those. But definitely feel free, if you want to get a head start on week 7, you can go ahead and do the MLA exam and the reading response. Those will be fine, but definitely work on this week's assignments as well. All right. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can email, call, or I'll be in my office Monday through Thursday. So otherwise, have a great week, everybody, and I'll talk to you all very soon. And watch the paper number 4 thesis video that's with this. All right. See you all in a little bit.